Welcome everyone to Research to Runtime. This is a session on building voice agents with AI. I'm Talia Goldberg. I'm a partner at Bessemer. I'm in our San Francisco office and lead many of our AI investments. For those that aren't familiar, Bessemer is a global venture firm. We partner with entrepreneurs from the very earliest stages all through the growth stages and later stages, and are proud to work with companies like Perplexity, Anthropic, Fall, Abridge, Canva, Shopify, ClickHouse, and many others. And Bhavik and I have been observing and seeing a whole host of exciting activity, new startups, new categories being built around voice AI and voice agents. And a lot of those companies are building and enabled by ElevenLabs. So we're super excited to have a session here to go deep with Jozef Marko. I'll let Jozef introduce himself momentarily, who is the expert on all of this and is enabling this revolution. So Jozef, if you don't mind giving a quick intro on yourself and on Eleven, and then we'll jump in on demos and keep this interactive. Please note for everyone attending that you can add questions in the chat. Please do that. We'll try and hit as many as we can in real time, and then we'll save time at the end for Q&A too.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Talia. Yeah, I'm Jozef. Yeah, my brief intro. I work at ElevenLabs almost 2 years. Basically, I built the conversational AI, what now became an agents platform. So initially, we were thinking about it as just like in a way API connecting text to speech, speech to text, turn taking and orchestration. And now it evolved to more like full-fledged agents platform where you can manage, deploy, monitor, and analyze your agents at scale. Before that, I'm based in Switzerland, and before that, I was working at Google Zurich for more than 6 years, and yeah, and that's pretty much it. Originally, I'm from Slovakia, yeah, and that's like a brief intro, and yeah, now I'm basically leading the agents platform in ElevenLabs, what is kind of like one of the two pillars in the company. So we have the creative platform, which is more like a consumer-oriented, and everything from text-to-speech to music. And then we have the agents platform, which is a little bit more enterprise-oriented, using the technology that we have built.
Awesome. Well, Eleven's rise has been meteoric. I think it's one of the fastest growing, not just AI voice companies, but companies, AI companies in the world, reaching, hundreds of millions of annual revenue in just a couple years, and announced at like a over $6 billion valuation pretty recently. So congratulations on all of your success, especially, there's this crazy landscape happening, a lot of foundation models that are also offering voice products themselves, and yet Eleven continues to lead this market and lead this ecosystem. So it's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, that's definitely the true. Yeah, I joined after the 1 billion round, and yeah, just in less than 2 years, basically, it went really to 6.6, and we will see how it goes. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we thought that we have a whole host of topics to go through, but we thought that we'd kick off with a live demo to start, because I think the demo, a lot of things will flow from that in terms of how Eleven Stack works under the hood, how to get started, what's hard and easy to get production ready, some pro tips for folks, and building just a real-time conversational agent using ElevenLabs technology. So I'm going to turn it over to Jozef to do that. But maybe, Jozef, right before you do you mind just sharing a little bit about what you're seeing being built on Eleven? I mean, you have this incredible view into what's happening in the ecosystem and what sorts of things people are building today, what's being coming down the pipe. Maybe just help us understand the sorts of things that are possible with Eleven today and what's coming, and then we can jump into that demo.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So yeah, as for the creative platform, that's more on kind of, the creative, the voiceovers, the audiobooks, and so on. For the agents platform, what we see is really like vast case of use cases. So we are a horizontal kind of player in the agent space. So that's why we have a lot of use cases. So and that kind of scales from people building consumer applications, personal companions, business assistants. We have quite a few of those, up all the way to like heavy enterprise building, customer support, internal training agents, let's say, yeah. So all kind of in between customer experience agents, sales agents, and then in between we have something like, let's say, medium-sized companies doing, let's say, recruiting, and they're using our platform, to call potential applicants, or anything to all the way to, let's say, debt collection in Latin America, and people using this as an efficient way to remind users to pay their outstanding amounts. So it's really kind of vast. We don't actually have like one vertical, which would be, let's say, 50% plus, but we have like many which are kind of like in the space which I mentioned. And the kind of the biggest ones are really like the internal learning, the customer support, the customer experience. And the customer support is also, it can be, it can be over chat, it can be over voice. So it can be over, telephone. Roughly 40 to 50% of the traffic is coming through telephony, through either Twilio or SIP trunk where they connect the phone. So yeah, that's kind of the brief overview. Yeah, that's kind of the overview, I would say. Yeah.
Super helpful. Well, yeah, I mean, we'd love to kick it off with a demo. I know, Joseph, you had something prepared.
Sounds great. Yeah, sounds great. Let me share the screen. Okay. So yeah, so here I have an agent which I built kind of, or which we built before starting the call. It is a demo agent, but it kind of demonstrates very well the enterprise use case. So as you kind of see, or maybe I can just do a brief overview, is that okay, here I created an agent. I can define the prompt, kind of what the agent should do, what should be, let's say, the first message of the agent. You can see I can use dynamic variables which will be replaced at the call start. So basically the in this case the developer or the business would provide those at the business start. For the demo, I can just specify them here. And then you can pick the voice, which is kind of very important. You can pick the TTS kind of which you want to use. So the flash is the fastest, multilingual would be kind of the highest quality, and then we are also introducing the expressive mode later this year, hopefully. So that's kind of like in a nutshell, what is the most important. Then the LLM is the very important aspect. And yeah, and then you specify the knowledge base, you specify the analysis that you want to run, like whether you solve the user criteria, what was the user sentiment, what kind of the user was interested in. So let's say, okay, they were reporting a fraudulent transaction, they were discussing the plan type. This is a kind of a banking demo. And then you can collect this information post call, filter the calls based on these fields and so on. You can define tests to make sure that it's working reliably when you make changes, and then run these tests before you deploy the new version, and so on. But yeah, the most important thing here is that, let's say, voice agent traditionally, like what's the biggest issue is, of course, to make them reliable. So how do you make, LLM not hallucinate, tool hallucinate, knowledge hallucinate, and so on. And in general, the biggest issue is that obviously, as opposed to, let's say, chat agents or email agents, which, okay, you receive an email, you trigger a Zendesk webhook, and you reply to that email with an agent. You have, plenty of time to do that. So you can use like a very large model, thinking model. You think for 20 seconds, then you reply, you analyze all the questions in the email, and that helps. But obviously in the real-time conversation, like a voice conversation, you can't do that because it needs to be fast. So you can't really use thinking budgets. You can't even use like very large models, like, you know I mean, you can, but it just like decreases the experience a lot. Yeah, there are some Claude sonnets or GPTs that are like relatively slow. So then one way how to kind of alleviate this problem is that if you kind of can subdivide the space of potential conversations, imagine you are a large enterprise, you have like a lot that you can talk about. You can kind of encapsulate these different stages into different sub-agents. So that's why we build this workflow. You can, for example, you can drag here and then you can create a new sub-agent. And yeah, but let me remove it now. And then what's the goal there is that for every sub-agent, you can kind of like, let's say, add a document which would just be kind of available to this sub-agent. So for example, in this case, we would have an orchestrator agent, whose job is to navigate kind of the user to the right place. And here for this demo, we would have kind of two branches that this can go. And let's say this branch is the one where we go if the user has a question about their transactions, and this branch we go if they have a question about the current plan and package. And so basically this way, in real life, imagine you would have much more. You can kind of like set up then the goal, what should the agent ask, what should they respond, just only to that domain. But more importantly, you can kind of specify tools and knowledge base only relevant, let's say, to the business, to possible plans that the bank offers. So you could click add document and you would add the document about the business plan, about the bank's plans. And then what's great is that if you are in a different agent, this agent will not be confused by either the knowledge base or the tools available, which are like totally not relevant to the current context. And by that, you kind of like increase the reliability of the answers of the agent. So that's kind of like one important goal. And the second important thing about this is that you include determinism. So sometimes you can imagine that maybe some of you already did like work with agents and LLMs and so on. You can say something like, okay, like before revealing the balance, please do call verify user tool, right? So your user is authenticated, right? But this is kind of like the problem with this approach, obviously, is that you can kind of like please and beg the LLM, but just like 1 in 1,000 times, it will just not do it, or like depending on the LLM, can be more or less frequent. And this is just like obviously a big problem, and that's what we are solving with the kind of like the deterministic flows in these workflows. So in this case, and then I will actually show the call how this works in practice, is that we have the orchestrator agent, and if let's say the user wants to talk about the transactions, and let's say this is a privileged information, we go to the transaction agent, sub-agent, which will kind of guide us through, okay, you need to kind of like ask about the identity of the person and verify their name and account number. So that basically the agent will prompt about this information until it has this information. And each time the information is provided, it will call deterministically the verify user Salesforce tool, and it will pass if you open this tool. If you open this tool, it will basically call our sandbox Salesforce instance, and it will pass the user's details. So it will pass the account number, and it will pass the name that we kind of in real time is extracted from the conversation. And then if this tool will succeed, only then it will kind of use these fetch Salesforce tools transactions. So in this way, we alleviated the problem of the LLM by mistake for whatever reason, because the user persuades them, calling the fetch transactions tool. So this agent it doesn't have kind of visibility to this tool. If you go to the tools, let's say there are no tools, so it cannot on its own call this tool with some like random details and like fetch potentially some privileged information. So this is kind of guarded by the deterministic flow of this workflow. And each time the user will be kind of trying to do that, the agent will just kind of hand over the flow to this deterministic subgraph. And then if the verification will fail, the flow will automatically kind of return on the way back. So it will return back to this agent, and they will try to, okay, maybe try again, try provide the information again, and so on. And then once we fetch the transactions, then we have an agent which already will have the access to the transactions and can discuss the transactions and have access to another kind of deterministic flow. So what is kind of like very common is that, let's say you say that, okay, I don't recognize this transaction. Can you please create a ticket? And then the LLM sometimes would say like, okay, yes, great, I created the ticket, amazing. But then actually it will just like say this sentence, but it will not really do anything. And you kind of are leaving the call thinking that everything is good, but it's not good. And so here we would again have kind of a deterministic flow, that the only way kind of how to invoke this tool is to invoke it deterministically. So the LLM will decide to go this path, and then we will call the tool. So yeah, now I will go to the demo now when we kind of went through this, and then I can talk about some other parts as well. So let me start this. So you can basically click preview agent here, and then let's
Drum
see.
roll. Let's see it.
Yeah, let's hope that everything goes fine, and also now you kind of know a little bit how the flow will be. Yeah, let's see.
Hello, you are speaking to the bank's virtual assistant. How can I help you today?
Hi, yeah, I want to know what plan am I on at the moment.
You're currently on our Bank Bronze plan, which is our basic offering with no additional perks. Would you like to hear about the benefits
Oh,
of our
that's
other
great. That's
plans?
great. Actually, what I'm interested about is actually, sorry, I'm interested about to reviewing my recent transactions.
No problem. I can help you with that. To get started, could you please provide your full name and your 8-digit account number?
For sure. Yeah, I'm Josh and A3457.
Thanks, Josh. Could you please confirm your full name as it appears on your account and double check your account number? It should be 8 characters with no spaces or extra
Okay.
symbols.
Yeah, sorry. It's actually John Smith, AB123456.
Thank you, John. Here are your 3 most recent transactions. Starbucks for $4.50, Uber for $12.98, and Amazon for $350, all on August 28th, 2025. Is there anything about these transactions you'd like to review or that you don't recognize?
Well, yeah, actually, I think the Amazon transaction is kind of fishy. I'm not sure I made a transaction.
I understand, John. To help you further, I'll need your email address so I can open a support ticket and connect you with a human agent to investigate the
Okay.
Amazon
Yeah, for
transaction.
sure.
Please.
It's john@gmail.com.
Thank you, John. I've opened a support ticket, and a human agent will reach out to you at john@gmail.com to investigate the Amazon transaction. Is
Okay.
there anything else?
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's all. Thanks a lot. So yeah, so it kind of worked. It worked, yeah, great. So we can actually go and like talk a little bit about the flow. And by the way, and then we can also talk about the latency. Obviously, moving through the workflows graph increases the latency a little bit. So you could see that like some of the responses were faster, some of them were slower. And that depends kind of whether we are moving in the kind of the workflows graph. Here, at first I tried to provide a fraudulent kind of credentials, and it kind of rejected the answer, and it kind of rejected it deterministically. So we can go to the, and also at the beginning I was talking about a plan, then it kind of went all the way back. So it went back to the orchestrator and went down. So it made more than one transition between turns because I changed the topic to the transactions. So let's see the recent call. Here we have the complete like recording, and here we see the movements on the graph. So I am asking about the plan. So we went to the bank plan subagent, and then I started to actually be interested about the transactions, and our agent made actually two transitions. So it went back to the orchestrator subagent so that you don't have to have. I mean, you could also speed this up to have like a link between them, but as you can imagine, as the graph grows, there will be like too many links. So we just leave that into kind of like a top-down structure, and it goes back to the orchestrator subagent, and that one detects that it's kind of in the realm of the debit account subagent, so it goes to the right way. And then that agent is already able to handle the conversation forward, ask about the credentials. We provide the credentials. This way, actually, even the tool may not be called because the agent knows that it should be 8 digits. So since it was not kind of at 8 continuous digits, I kind of repeated that part. It would just query right away. And then I kind of correct myself, and then it dispatches again this workflow route. And this is all now deterministic. So this fetch Salesforce transaction is conditioned on the outcome of this thing. And as we can see, a result of this part. So here is what's being kind of passed to the webhook by the LLM. So this is extracted from our turn. This is exactly what I've spoken. And then it says match true. So it's basically matching the record ID. It's correct, and the tool is succeeding. And that's why our workflow will now execute the fetch transactions. And this is kind of now conditioned deterministically on the outcome. So we will never kind of reveal the information. So like kind of the worst case, what can happen is that we have like some bad experience that this tool is being called like, when it shouldn't or whatever. But this tool will never be called unless this tool succeeds. And then we are moving down to the discuss transaction subagent. We are discussing the transaction subagent, and then we open a Zendesk ticket. So it ends with, again, going through this workflow route that we open the Zendesk ticket and, mark the email where we should kind of reach out back to me. So that's quickly the demo. Yeah, it's already been 10 minutes, so maybe I will pause here. Obviously, this is kind of like the enterprise use case. There are other use cases which would be kind of different, could be faster. You can, it's also very important like which LLM do you use. So we have also our own ElevenLabs hosted LLMs, which are the fastest. So you can use Qwen, which is like below 100 milliseconds. And then maybe I can demo that. Maybe I can demo that a bit later. And I will like pause here for now. So I give you space, Talia and Bhavik.
Well, Joseph, that was super, super cool. And it was cool at the end to see that it only costed 4 cents. And I imagine that was someone who was actually talking, it would cost a lot more. I imagine that a lot of customers that start using ElevenLabs conversational agent are using something else before. Maybe they've tried to string something together with the models directly. Maybe they're using other frameworks. Can you talk about at what point do people decide, gosh, like I need to be using an agent or an agentic framework versus, trying to build the stack themselves?
Yeah, so it kind of really depends on the technical level of the company. Yeah, like we have companies who use us. There are kind of like many layers to this. So there's like a company, let's say, who only uses text to speech kind of API, either via a different provider, like a different orchestrator, where they just like plug in their key, or they kind of like build their own some kind of self-hosting thing. Then we have another kind of layer is that who uses the agents platform, but truly just like an API for the calls. But let's say they use custom LLM, right? So you can, in the LLM section, you can use the custom LLM option, and then they will provide a URL to some kind of endpoint that provides the answers, right? So they will not use any of the kind of, I mean, they in theory could, like it's compatible, but most of the time they would not use most of the, let's say, knowledge-based tools, workflows. They would just use us for the turn taking, speech to text to speech, and the orchestration. But their server would be kind of replying to the actual, like, okay, this is the latest message, this is the chat, like tell me what should I say, right? So their endpoint will kind of like say that, and then they can run tools or whatever on the endpoint, and then provide the final answer what we should spoke out. That's kind of like the medium tier. So they mostly use the conversational kind of API route, the WebSocket route. And then the third like bucket is that obviously they use the agents platform as a whole. So they use the workflows, they use the tests, they use the permissioning, they share the agents. Now we have versioning, right? So they deploy like traffic to different versions, they A/B test, they use the analytics and everything. And it's definitely not easy to kind of like recreate it like reliably. And most people are actually in that bucket. So we actually have, I'm very analytics driven, so we have analytics for almost everything. And let me check briefly so I don't spread the rumors. But I think when we kind of check that, okay, let's say the agent is created, was it created via or was it created via API? And so it's kind of roughly 3 to 1 for the UI and for the actual traffic. So when we look at the traffic and we attribute the traffic to an agent and we look at how was this agent created, it's kind of 3 to 1 for it was created via kind of our platform versus 1 it was kind of created via API. So, and then when you look at how was the agent lastly kind of updated, was it like via API or UI? It's even more, it's like 5 to 1. So most people use us actually, as a platform, roughly, let's say 20-25% use us as the API part. And the custom LLM traffic is, I think, around maybe 6%. So it's not actually that big, but it's still pretty like, yeah, significant. And to answer your question, so this is kind of the stats behind it is, yeah. So what is like advantage of our agents platform is that it's let's say much more privacy safe compared to maybe some other providers because we host kind of everything. So we host the speech to text to speech. We have our own native rack, which is like super fast. We embed the queries. We fetch the document from the vector store, which is hosted by us. You can even use the LLM, which is hosted by us. So basically, you kind of trust one company and like that's it. Obviously, we also have the zero attention mode. Whereas if let's say you use some other orchestrator and you're using ask for text to speech, let's say some deepgram for speech to text or whatever, and you use Pinecone for RAG, and then you're using the orchestrator itself, the LM. So all of a sudden you have like 5 companies that like have access to your traffic, but obviously for large enterprises like matters. So it's a bit of both, but it just depends on the kind of the so I think like even when we speak with the companies, like some companies, let's say it also depends whether let's say they're someone like Nike and they have their own like customer support experience teams, or let's say
Right.
there's someone who is doing agents, right? And if they are doing agents and they're selling agents, it's a different story. But we had a company who was like selling agents for some like niche vertical, and they are like buying TTS, and then I tested their product, and like the turn taking was taking like 6 seconds. So it was like very bad. But sometimes, yeah. So it's also kind of like personal thing. Yeah.
And Joseph, so you mentioned privacy as a key differentiator,
Mhm.
and we've actually gotten a couple questions in the chat about that in particular.
Mhm.
When you're requesting customer data, whether it's bank transactions or checking a name against a Salesforce entry, you can imagine that there are opportunities for people to abuse that, to abuse the flow, to find other ways to access data that they shouldn't, or impersonate people that they shouldn't. How do you protect against that in the product, apart from it being an end-to-end sort of closed system with all the data and models sitting on ElevenLabs' infrastructure?
Yes, for sure. So I mean, so yeah, the advantage is really to that you can just use the workflow to so there are kind of like two things, like somebody can spam your agent if you don't have the authentication built in. So you can have the authentication built in a way that the kind of the business's servers need to provide an authorization token that they fetch from us so that they can start the call. It's kind of like a first level like protection. So let's say only the users that are logged into their account can start the call. Not anyone can start the call. Then of course there is an issue that if you have a customer support is normally like broadly available. It's not like you have to log in to reach your customer support. Maybe you are not a client yet. So that by definition such an agent must be public and anyone can start the call. So so yeah, then you can start the call, but then there is this the workflows part, which is like very important that you don't obviously provide sensitive information to the LLM. Like you need to assume that if you provide sensitive information to the LLM, it can get leaked. Like it can get like obviously people are saying guardrails and all these things. Like that's like guardrails are important, but they're like not like bulletproof thing. And obviously, you want to also minimize the risk of a damage to the company by, let's say, an agent going weird way. You will always have like one out of 100 users who will just start to talk about some random problems with the agent, and you want the agent to not go that route. But yeah, for the sensitive information, you always need to kind of like guard it with a tool. So it's a deterministic part that decides whether this information will be provided to the agent or not. And then it's like relatively safe. Like the worst case, what can happen is that the agent doesn't work, but it's like it's relatively safe. And then obviously there's the third magnitude of risk that like if you're using some random companies who obviously either they have the access to the to the user speech or to what's being generated by the agent, that's then based on the company how good of course they can shield the data.
That's helpful. And with regards to PII in particular, both PII that the agent shares with the user and PII that the agent shares with the tools, how do you think about that in the framework?
Yeah. So the PII, I mean, the PII, yeah, of course, obviously, that's we have clients who, let's say, they want to deploy this on their private network, and we are working on kind of like making that possible. That way, kind of let's say nobody has access, but it's a bit tricky, it's a bit tricky with the private network like VPC. Other than that obviously we have, when you pick the LLM, let's say Gemini, like we have kind of like business agreements with those providers so that they don't train on the data or don't use it in any way. I'm not 100% sure if they should even like delete it or not sure. Obviously if you will be in talks with our sales representatives, they will be able to tell. But so there is some level like you can opt into zero retention mode, and if you opt into zero retention mode, then it will also restrict to which LLMs can you use, only the ones that we have also agreement for the zero retention mode. So if you opt in for zero retention mode, like the PI will never be stored, or at least it shouldn't, right? So yes, LLM will process this data, it will kind of see it, but it should not store it in any way. We should not store it in any way. So it's kind of like fine. If you don't opt in for the, because let's say you want to store the conversations, then yeah, I mean, you just store the conversations just in the same way that, people provide their personal information to Zendesk, right? Like, so people provide this information to Zendesk, and then kind of the LLM will not have access to this information when on a call with a different client. So like, and as long as you are using the tools and you're guarding the flow deterministically correct, it's still kind of fine. Yeah.
And Joseph, one more question on privacy, and then we move on. You mentioned earlier that a lot of users authenticate the phone calls before
Yeah.
passing them through to the agent, so that way,
Mhm.
they can call tool calls. They can make tool calls with the user's data. What if it's a phone system that's open to anyone on the internet? Say a dialer for a dentist's office. How in that case do you authenticate a user?
Yes. So yeah, if it's if it's a telephone provider, it's kind of an issue. But there, yeah, you need to kind of get from them some kind of information, which should like, be like the same way how you would kind of like, how would you do it with a human? Like, you always need to ask you a question, like, how would you do it with a human? Right? Like, human would like ask for some, like, okay, what's your birthday? What's the maiden name of your mom, or whatever? Like, what did you put like during the registration? And then it will check it in the system, right? Like, so like here it's like, there is nothing kind of secretive, like that. Nothing changes here. Like, the only thing what changes here is that users, if they detect, okay, they are speaking, or I mean, this should also be in many jurisdictions, it should be obviously like said upfront, that they are speaking with the AI bot, they may try to, okay, I know how AIs work, I will try to break this, right? Which, if it's a human, they will not have this idea. That's kind of the only difference. And they may try to, right, like call 5 times, may try to persuade the LLM, whatever, because the LLM will be polite no matter what, right? It will kind of no hang up on you, usually. So then it's just like really about, just as long as you kind of believe your flow, it's good. But the identifier that you identified and authenticate the user should not be, let's say even the example that I showed would be kind of potentially suboptimal. Depends. You could, let's say John Smith is a common name, so you could just say John Smith. And if then the only thing that you rely on this is an 8-digit number, right? Like, it's not such a huge security. So it should maybe be larger number, so they cannot just like DDoS the attack, because let's say the people will not know that they already called with this person. Obviously, you can build in such a defenses that one number can call you only that many times, and so on. Also, the transcription service can, let's say, change one character. Like, it shouldn't be that you change one
Right.
character and by accident you get access to the data.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And we've also got some questions in the chat around what's underlying this framework. Is it a cascaded set of models, or sort of an end-to-end speech model? And where do you see that going over time?
Yeah, for sure, makes sense. That's great. Yeah, I will answer that. So, and before I answer that, I just like quickly, like, kind of like that the privacy is one differentiator. Like, it's clearly one, like a big one, but the biggest one is probably for sure still the kind of the vertical integration. And that's kind of coming to this question of like, what do we use? So we use the cascaded approach. So it's like speech to text, LLM, turn taking, kind of text to speech, and so on. The reason for that is that it's just much more reliable than speech to speech. And even like speaking with some folks who are kind of, let's say, in the field, or like close to OpenAI, or whatever. And obviously, we also have our own research in various areas, is that each time you kind of improve the speech to speech capabilities, so let's say the expressiveness or the turn taking of the speech to speech model, equally the kind of reasoning goes down. And this is kind of an issue. And for most, let's say for true language learning, like, you need speech to speech, because the model needs to see what accent did you kind of spoke out the words in German or whatever, in order to guide you well on the lesson. Like, it's hard to do that through just the text layer. But for most of the other cases, like the text layer is fine, especially if you have some annotations, like the person is shouting or something like that. Like it's sufficient, and the reasoning is just much better, and also the monitoring is much better. So imagine that the LLM provides a very bad answer, and then you are trying to inspect why this did happen, right? And for example, for GPT real time, you have the real time GPT and you have transcriptions, but the transcriptions is kind of like a hook to the flow done by a different model, and it's like nothing what the model actually sees. So let's say the wrong answer was provided. Now, is it the issue with my prompt that, okay, my prompt is wrong? Or is it the issue that the model understood something else what was said? Like you will never know. Whereas in this case, you can see what's the transcription. That's on the input. It's either correct or not correct. Okay, if it's correct, it's a problem with the prompt. If it's incorrect, yeah, it was a transcription issue. We should improve kind of like the flow to repeat that information. And this is potentially like a big issue. Also, it's cheaper and you can just fully operate on, let's say, you can design tests, you can replay we have a replay conversation thing which is just on the text layer. It's yeah, if that makes sense.
And to that point, to sort of creating a feedback loop to improve the agents, what are the most common pitfalls that you see with when people build on these agent platforms? What are the small things that they do that rapidly improve the user experience?
Yes, so I think so. For example, let's say you have transfer to human tool, right? Like most of the time, you would not want to transfer to human because if you transfer to human, that likely means that the kind of task of the AI agent kind of failed. So what you would want to do is that you go to the conversations page and you filter on the conversations that had the transfer to human tool triggered. So you can do that with a simple chip, and then you have all the calls that were transferred to human for some reason. And you inspect the call and you see like what's the problem. Okay, is the problem with the prompt? Is the problem the knowledge base is missing? And then you just like update the knowledge base, or you create a test, you change the prompt. So let's say let's say we have a text to speech SDK and we have a conversational AI SDK, right? And then the user says like, okay, do you have a Swift SDK? And the agent says no, but we actually do, but we do have it for the agents platform. We don't have it for the TTS, and it would be quoting the TTS document, right? So then you kind of need to like think how to restructure your agent to be able to capture this. And you can create a test where you copy this conversation exactly at the state where this question was asked and make sure that going forward, the agent will say yes. So it's like there is like kind of no silver bullet, but like kind of the agents platform gives you the tools to kind of iterate on the agents, inspect the calls, make sure this you are kind of like one by one kind of solving all the issues on your agent.
Well,
And make
Joseph, this has
Mhm.
been great. We got, I know we only have like five-ish, 7 minutes left or so. And I want to see if we can do a little bit of a fire round. We got a ton of questions and interaction in the chat. So maybe we can just run through some of these topics really quickly and talk about them very briefly live for the benefit of the audience.
For sure.
It's on 11. Cool. So first off, do you support multilingual agents?
Oh yeah, definitely. So
And one of the things that, we hear a lot from folks is that 11 really shines with latency. What do you typically see? Like, what do you measure? How do you think about your performance there?
So yeah, for the multilinguality, you can add the languages here, and that's let's say you add Croatian and automatically, let's say it translates the first message also to Croatian, and you can save the agent. And what's very good here that you can go to the tools and you can turn on this detect language. And when you have the detect language, we will detect the language on the intent. So if the user says, "Can I speak Croatian?" it will work. And it will also work on the audio. So if the user just starts to speak Croatian, just the agent, the transcription, the DTS, everything will just switch to Croatian. So it's like, yeah, we are kind of this, and this is used by like 60% of our traffic. And on the latency, what was the question on the latency?
Just how do you measure the latency and what's the benchmark right now?
So yeah, this is a topic that we could be talking for ages, but obviously, what do you mean the latency, right? Like people say that we have sub 1 second latency, whatever, and then I actually play the agent, I record the audio, I go to the iMovie, and I see how long the silence was, and it was like 3 seconds, and they claim that they have sub 1 second latency. So what they usually say is that, okay, if we ignore the network, if we ignore the silence that you need in order to kind of like trigger the generation of the turn, then it's like 1 second. But that's not like the real kind of latency that the user experiences. So for our case, if you would want to have the fastest agent, and I can show here, you can pick the Quen model, which is like 90 milliseconds P50. Then you can use our new scribe that is right in the platform. You can turn on the scribe, which is
Cool.
50 milliseconds, and text to speech, which is the flash, which is like 150 milliseconds. So altogether, this is like 300 milliseconds end to end after the turn has been triggered. But obviously, like you need some kind of silence to detect that you should trigger a turn. You should not be like just triggering turn all the time. So the P25 of silence before triggering a turn is like 300 milliseconds or so. P50 is maybe 500 milliseconds. P90 is like 2 seconds. And like P90 should be 2 seconds because that's also kind of how in the world with humans, we sometimes like need more silence to really make sure that the user is not thinking and finish speaking. So then end to end, you are kind of around the second, 1.1 second, like real end to end kind of, but that is like very good. Like almost nobody has that. If you're not using if you use the workflow and you're transitioning over edge, the LLM needs to kind of like make sure that, detect that it wants to move, then the tool needs to be called and so on. Easily you can get like 1-2 seconds extra. But if you're just in one node and you use this setup, it's like super fast. So I challenge everyone to go and try, and they will be like very surprised how fast it is.
Awesome. What's your scope of voice cloning detection and thinking about like cloned voice phishing campaigns or DDoS attacks?
Voice clone. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, we have to clone a voice, like we have some restrictions there. And then the other thing is that obviously we also have, some safety in place to ban bad actors. And, we banned many times. A lot of it is automatic. We also have some safety team to kind of prevent, scam kind of agents being on the platform and so on. And certain features are only locked, like certain voices and certain features are locked kind of to based on enterprise vetting. So only once we know the client, we kind of allow those features.
Super helpful. What happens when an agent or you encounter an IVR or voicemail?
Yeah, perfect. So you can go to the tools thing. You can turn on the play keypad touchtone, and then the agent will just navigate through it.
Cool. And then maybe one last question, which is, there are other frameworks around building, like, orchestrating voice agents, folks like Vappy, Cartesia, LiveKit, others. Help us think through like the trade-offs when one versus the other makes most sense and what you see happening in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I will tell you that it's kind of
We
like,
know you're a little biased, but,
yeah,
in
a little
your
biased.
most unbiased way possible.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, for example, if you go to Vapi, the problem is that, let's say they're using, let's say mostly as probably for text to speech, and, they're using, let's say, DeepGram for speech to text. What's the problem with DeepGram and what we like solved here a lot is kind of contextual transcription. So what you can try and go and test with Vapi, try it like, let's say 3 times, put the first question of the agent, or like tell agent to ask you a question, and then you reply short. So what's very common with the users, obviously, like the LLMs, they provide a lot of long lengthy answer. Users don't. Users, they just reply with one word. And so let's say the question is, you are doing some real estate scouting, and you call a person and ask them, are they living in a house? Like this is actually like a real example that I was just discussing with one kind of prospect of ours. Are you living in a house or a condo? And then the user just says, and imagine, a telephony line with like a bad connection, like they say like condo or something like that. And then out of sudden, DeepGram will transcribe it as avocado. And then like kind of like the whole conversation, then, the agent will again provide some super lengthy answer because like it doesn't know what to do. User gets annoyed and just like hangs up. And so what we have here, and it's both true with Scribe and also not when you are using Scribe, and our internal testing shows like a 30% lower semantic error rate for agentic use cases based on an internal eval that we did to the best second provider, Cartesia Assembly, they're even like much more. that our transcription will transcribe it as a condo, probably like 9 out of 10 times or even more. I bet you that in VidVapi, most of the time it would not transcribe it as condo. You can have the same question like, do you live in Ljubljana or Skopje? And the person says Skopje. Like there is no chance that the Vapi would transcribe it as Skopje. So like our solution is, again, it's vertically integrated. We have access to the models. We can kind of like work with the clients. If something doesn't work, we can fix it where the problem is, like no matter where the problem is. And obviously the latency is kind of the fastest because we have this vertical integration. If you go and try the setup with the ElevenLabs hosted LLM, Scribe, and TTS, it's like super fast. So I mean, obviously, if you already are there, I mean, it's and it works for you fine. It's great, and obviously they were the first in the space, and many maybe even some features they have that we don't have. Maybe that's also like vice versa. I don't know if they have the language switching on the audio. So if there are some features that you require, or let's say you have a good price, or it's not like it's a bad service. Like Vapi is a solid player. It's not Cartesia is a little bit newer. I don't think they have so much as a product. It's mostly like the SDK thing, but I don't have too much details. So it's obviously I believe that we are the best, but it's it's as I said, it's not like it's a bad player, and you can have a good results there as well.
Super helpful. Well, Jozef, thank you so much. This was so insightful. And as you can see from the questions, there's so much engagement and so much more that we could even talk about. Where should we direct folks to Eleven? Obviously, they can go to your website. Is there any other resources that we should share with them or ways to get in touch?
Yeah, so you can check. Yeah. The best is either join our Discord if you are more like a developer. If you are anyone, like we actually have enterprise users, like large enterprise users who somehow ended up to being in our Discord and they became a client. So we are trying to be very active on Discord. You can tag me there as well. You can obviously reach out to me via LinkedIn and so on. And then we have like a sales form, so you can just contact sales, and they will definitely like reach out back to you for the large enterprise use cases. Yeah, I think that would be perfect.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. We really appreciate the time and congrats on what you've achieved. It is awesome. And it is just amazing to see all the value and the use cases emerging.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot,
All
everyone.
right. Thanks, Jozef.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Joseph.